welcome to another episode of Banter. My name is Sergeant LaFavors. I'm your host. Today, joined with us is a very special guest. It's PFC Wesley Wise. He is one of my warriors that I was able to enlist back in October. He's a Connersville High School senior. First enlistment. He wanted to emphasize that first enlistment that I received as a new recruiting and retention NCO and career counselor out here in the Whitewater Valley. So thank you, Wesley, for taking the time to come and join us and answer some of our questions. I want to start off first and let some of the viewers listening in YouTube kind of learn a little bit more about you. But tell us kind of where you're from, where you were born, where you lived, and when you moved to Connersville.
I was born here in Connersville, actually, but I for the first 8 years of my life, I lived over in Liberty, and then I moved here to Connersville in around fourth grade. Ever since fourth grade, I've kind of lived here, played sports here, played sports in Liberty. Really haven't done a whole lot other than that, but.
Okay. Well, so tell us a little bit about kind of what went into the decision for you to decide, because I know my story, I know how I found you, but I kind of want to learn a little bit more and hopefully let some of the viewers at home learn a little bit more about you and why you decided to take that step and joining the National Guard.
A lot of it was just like background influenced, was like my dad always pressured it. He always wanted me to join some sort of military. He always wanted me to be in a branch of some sorts because my grandpa was in. My dad wanted to be in, didn't make it. And then we knew a lot of people that just like had a lot of that military experience. My dad thought it'd be really good for me, thought I'd fit in really well with it, but it was never my first option.
Right.
And then once I met you, I started hearing more about it, started looking more into it, and I decided like I was always wanted to help people, so I figured like that would be a really good way to do it without like declaring and like yelling out that, hey, this is what I do. I wanted to kind of be behind the scenes and do that, so I ended up joining, and that's why I'm in here.
So was it predominantly, of course, because you have multiple options now. Currently you'll have 6 options. If you were to ever be interested in joining the military, you'd have 6 options to join 6 different branches of your choice. But with the National Guard specifically, was it predominantly the idea of it being a part-time obligation, you coming home, or what was sort of the kind of weighing factor of why the National Guard? Why not any other branch? I
like the National Guard more because of the diversity. If I want to go full active, I could go full active. If I wanted to keep the part-time gig, I can keep the part-time gig. It also opens up quite a few different doors. Like if I wanted to go to college, college is all paid for. Like I said, if I wanted to go active, I have that option, or I have the option to just keep the part-time. Or there's a lot of different jobs that with other branches, they don't offer those jobs. So I figured it'd be a lot more useful in my way, so that way I could persuade it and use it in my own advantage versus having to follow a strict career path. So, the biggest concern I've heard about recently from my experience and from appointments that I've conducted with individuals within the community, their biggest concern has always been the physical requirement. Obviously, I can always mention to them, this is the reality of it. But coming from somebody who's now freshly joined and who has kind of gotten some exposure up at Muncie with us of the the PT standard and the physical standard. With your background in football, you obviously are very much physically active. It wasn't much of a challenge for you to acclimate. You just kind of had to train for the specific mechanics of the PT test. But what would you tell somebody who, might have those concerns and might not be as, adequately in shape with those type of standards in place that would be freshly joining? So really, in all honesty, just don't overthink all of it. It's really not as bad as what you would think. Once you get up there and you get like in the climate and you get acclimated with everybody else and you see everybody else that's also doing it, there's going to be people that are bigger, smaller, all different shapes and sizes that are also doing it. So it really isn't that big of a deal as long as you're not overthinking it and you don't get too in your head about it. It's really not that bad. I've seen people that are half of my size completing the exact same tasks with, if not better times than me, and it's really impressive. I've also seen bigger people do it. It's all really a mentality thing. They don't set the standards stupid high so you can't complete it. It's really basic stuff. Yeah,
I would say the biggest contrast from my experience, and some prior service people might understand this, but in my 8 years, from the differences between obviously the APFT, the push-ups, the sit-ups, the 2 mile has been in place for a long time.
Yeah.
When we transitioned to the new PT test, the original 3 event test, the push-ups, sit-ups, and 2 mile was harder to pass, but it was easier to max. with this test, I feel like, and maybe you could agree, it's easier to pass, harder to max, given obviously the events that we have and the requirements of each event to get to that 100 points. But what would you say is kind of the biggest challenge that you've seen with the PT test? Obviously, you weren't exposed to the original PT test, but what would be this for somebody of your physical prowess that you found challenging to kind of adapt to?
As long as you don't shoot your goals too high, because there's like a scale. Yeah. So as long as you're not shooting your goals too high, then it's very, very attainable. It's very easy to pass. You can scrape by with bare minimum, a little bit better. The points that you're weak in, once you figure it out, just train a little bit harder on those. And I mean, that really helps boost your scores overall. But as long as you're not like really trying to max everything out, then it's not that bad. It's not too hard. And
I will say, like, the differences between obviously the old PT test and this PT test has been the old PT test, you really just had to do more push-ups, more sit-ups, and have a decent amount of cardio to pass the 2 mile, where in this test you really have to get into the gym and focus on the fundamental aspects of it with the deadlift and with the spring drag carry and a couple other events that kind of culminate that whole body experience, that whole body exercise. So going into a little bit more specifically, because obviously you're going to be leaving here later this month, you'll be shipping out for basic. Your job, you selected 15 Quebec, which is an air traffic controller here for the National Guard. Tell us a little bit of why you chose that, and also kind of go into, were there any other options on the table for you? And if so, why didn't you choose those, and why did you go with air traffic controller?
I actually have quite a few different options currently that are laid out on the table for whenever I do come home, or even before that, before I ever knew what I was going to do. I did have quite a few options for like job-wise of what I wanted to do. The reason I chose air traffic controlling, however, was because I knew it was very good money in it. In the civilian world, it transferred really well. I can go get a job in the civilian world with my military background whenever I come back, and it helps me be able to get a job. It's not just simply military-based. Like I said, there's also that civilian side of it. So I knew it was very applicable in both fields. My options as far as I come back, though, I have ATC, I have Special Forces if I do want to try and chase that dream, which is a very, very strong dream to chase. Nothing would be easy there. Or I could also have the college background. There was also the thought of if I did go Special Forces, I didn't want to fall back just to infantry. Yeah. So I wanted to be able to go back to my MOS, which is 15 Quebec, air traffic controlling. So I kind of thought it through before I just laid everything out.
So yours was more of like a diversification, covering all your kind of avenues, having a little bit of backup. For somebody who is either going into their senior year this year, or somebody who's potentially going to their junior year and reaching that eligibility age, that 17 years of age, and being in a junior year of their high school career, what would you give them as a piece of advice if they thought, I'm going to wait until I graduate, but I am interested in the service? Would you tell them, hey, that's probably a good idea to wait until you graduate? Or, what would be your advice to them coming into this junior and senior year of high school?
If you're looking for the military, as in like you want it to be your career or you want it to be predominant throughout your life, I'd say join your junior year, because in between your junior and senior year, you can go to basic and you can already get a head start. You can already start going to drills. You can already start making money. You don't have to worry about going full-time yet. You can have a full year of just really, in all honesty, making money, putting in very little amount of time, going and doing what you have to do just to make that side money. It's very easy. There's nothing too much to it. I wish I would have done that if I would have knew, but I didn't know at the time. But if you're wanting to go to like college mainly, you're just kind of wanting this to be like a fallback, then I'd say wait till after your senior year. But I'd say if you're wanting it to be your main goal and your main drive towards your future, I'd say definitely join your junior year.
Yeah, and I obviously tell people joining your junior year is the most beneficial to you economically, and of course your contract, right? You sign a 6-year contract. If you join your junior year, a year and a half of your contract is knocked out just from being in high school. And I know you can attest to it, and I know if anybody were to ask you or approach you about it, but we were very accommodating of your senior year obligations. Obviously, you finished out your final year of high school being a wrestler, and then obviously you went to prom and you went to a couple other senior events throughout the year, and we were able to split train you for drill if that was a possibility. But with drill in particular, would you say that, we have kind of prepared you for basic? I know you're leaving here at the end of the month, but, has it really just kind of hopefully quelled some of the anxiety of going to basic, or do you still feel that kind of uneasy feeling?
I don't really feel too uneasy about it, but I'm also I know what I'm gonna face, so I know the reality of it. I know what's gonna happen. I'm not just gonna sit here and shy about it. I know I know the reality of it, so I don't really get in my head too much about it. I know what I'm preparing myself to go up there for, and I definitely think drill was definitely a wake up call in some aspects, because just getting woke up, sleeping on them hard cots, those early mornings.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely opens your eyes, but it's nothing too bad.
Which there's going to be real beds at basic training. You're going to have real beds. You're going to be making your bed. The only time you're ever going to really have an opportunity to sleep on hard ground is when you go do your FTX, which is your field training, and you'll have to dig improvised fighting positions, dig a hole. When me and my buddy dug our holes, we obviously dug it in a V formation to get maximum security range, but also we put a little kind of drain in our hole, which was smart because later that evening it did rain, and so we kind of made ourselves prepared for the idea that it could rain and flood our hole. But that's typically the only types of hardships you might face in basic training, is just understanding that at some point in time you're going to sleep on the floor. So obviously going into training, you're going to be gone for how long?
For basic, everybody's gone for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
But for my AIT, which is obviously my training for air traffic controlling, I'll be gone for 19 weeks.
Okay. And so when you return, which should be what, next?
March
Of
okay.
2025. What's the plan? Obviously, we're going to be nearing the end of the fall semester of any college opportunity. So what's the first step for you coming back? What's the outlook? What's something that you kind of think is something you would want to pursue?
I really want to try and make steps towards going into air traffic controlling.
Yeah.
And the civilian side. I want to go to a couple airports, see if I can talk my way into getting a job, maybe get an interview at least, something, get a little more experience with it. If I can't do that, hopefully, I can have an opportunity to be able to go to Special Forces Quals, go check that out, hopefully pass. If not, come back. And then college will probably be the last option for me personally. But,
yeah.
Or if they want me to just go to college to pursue ATC, well, then that's what I'll go do.
So what in college would you want to pursue? Obviously, if your job required you, hey, go get some education, whether it's associate's or bachelor's degree, in some type of air traffic controlling training or some type of airport management or organizational training. Outside of that, though, what would be that fallback for you on the education side in college?
Not 100% positive. Still
Okay.
very undecided about that. It would be something that I would look into heavier if I got faced with that.
And I don't blame you. Being your last resort,
Yeah.
not much thought is put into option
Yeah.
C because you're hoping option A works out. So,
Yeah.
So long-term goals obviously are important, but for everybody. But you come back from training, you get ingrained within your job as an ATC, so you have that civilian backup, and then your predominant goal is to get into the Special Forces qualification process and become Special Forces trained. But when your contract's up, when your contract's over, which remind me, your contract will be up what year? It's in 6 years, so you
Yeah, it'll
started
be
last year,
in
2029.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's
sometime October 2029 will be your ETS date. So is it something where, this is something that you feel like now that you've been exposed to it, even though you haven't been to training yet, but you've been exposed to it, you've been exposed to kind of the life, the benefits, the plan, if everything does work out and nothing, catastrophic ends up happening, is it something that you could feel like you can make a career out of?
Yes.
Okay. So long-term goals, obviously, for you would be, hey, stay in the Guard, any type of active duty aspiration. As far as I know, with me, I'm AGR, so Active Guard Reserve, so I still go home every day. I don't have to go to another base, but is that something where you'd kind of feel?
Active, as far as that goes, if I get faced with the opportunity to go somewhere and I feel like I'm prepared for it, I don't have too many obligations outside of that.
Right.
I would absolutely take the chance.
So what would be, based on obviously you can see my job. You see how much work I can kind of get done in a day or how much work I do throughout the week. There's supply, there's admin, there's recruiting. What would you say your first option would be if you could pick any AGR spot?
I've heard it through the like a grapevine, you could say, that there's like a year where whenever I come back, I can do a little bit of recruiting. I feel like that would be very very beneficial. Get that recruiting tab.
Yeah.
And also just to get the experience of getting out there, talking to people, seeing what they think. Because I feel like, personally, with how many people I know I graduated with and how many people I know went into the service, there is a heavy decline in the amount of people that are interested in serving their country, and I kind of want to help up those numbers a little bit.
Yeah, and I will say, just for transparency purposes for people at home, a lot of our mission is not mandated as heavily as it is in the active duty side. So reasons why we call ourselves career counselors, the reasons why we focus mainly on career development and career progression, and it's not just about joining the Guard, is because that's what we try to focus on in community development. Because when we make our communities better as career counselors, as recruiters here in the National Guard, we obviously make our organization better, we make our state better, we make our lives and our jobs a lot easier. But the fear is, and the reality is, in today's day and age, we are losing a tremendous amount of people to not only retention options for whatever the reasons are, medical restrictions, but also, of course, retirements. People come up to their retirement age, and the reality is that we can't get enough people to replace those numbers. If we lose those people and we don't replace them, we could drop out of a large state National Guard, which is what we are right now, which could mean funding cuts, units could be disbanded, command organization structures could be reorganized, and at that point we would see a lot less armories. One of the armories that could be on the chopping block would be this armory here in Connorsville, simply because it is a small unit. They are incredibly far from their battalion headquarters, which is in New Albany, and so that's mainly the fear. And so I try not to show that, for lack of better terms, desperation of trying to get people. But for me, the desperation lies in finding that person, because I know that person is somewhere out in the community who wants to join, who can join, who's eligible, who fits the criteria. But it's just that ability to have the conversation with them and to educate them about the opportunities. And so that's why Wesley's here today, and that's why we kind of discuss what we discuss, and that's who I bring in to try to discuss and educate. Last question here, college is obviously important, but I would say, and I think, a lot of people would agree, the college you choose is obviously, I think, more important, because I think it says a lot about your personality, and it also says a lot about if you're going to lose friends or not, because obviously I think Jamel is Ohio State guy. If you were to pick Michigan, you could put your friendship at risk. So if you could pick any college, obviously in the state, what would be your college of choice if you did go down that route, that third option?
Honestly, I've not even looked into it.
Okay, and that's fine. I'm curious. I always ask just simply because it like I said, it says a lot about your personality. If you pick Purdue, sometimes those people are a little bit too smart for their own good.
Yep.
You pick IU, you're kind of that free spirit, do whatever I want, get away with it type guy. IUPUI is somewhat middle ground. And then there's a few other ones that say a little bit about your personality, but it does say a lot about a person whenever they decide to go to a specific college, and so I always try to ask those questions. But yeah, so with long term, we talked about retirement in the National Guard. Would you prefer to retire day one pension? Obviously, we talked about AGR and stuff. Are you on that mindset of, hey, I would want to retire day one pension, or hey, I just retire, give me the 60-year pension, where when I turn 60, I'll get a National Guard pension, and I'll do my 20 years traditional and get out. Have you thought about that, or is that something?
I'm really wanting to go the super long-term one.
Yeah.
I really kind of want to get my full pension.
Yeah.
I want it all. If I'm gonna be in it, and then let's say I'm in it for 12 years,
yeah,
I'll re-up again. Go for 18.
Yep.
If I'm at 18, there's no point in stopping. I might as well just go my.
I promise you, I tell people, and people have told me this when I started, and I didn't believe it until I got to it. But they said, once you finish your initial contract, at that point, you got to go for another. If you feel like you can physically and mentally do it. And then once you get to 12 years, it's over. You are pretty much in, you can't get out, because if you do get out, you've gotten over halfway there. You're at the finish line.
Yep.
So that's sort of the paradox you find yourself in when you get to that point and you stay in long term. And that's why I'm very careful on who I tell people to sign 6-year contracts. For your case, I think a 6-year fit, perfect.
Yep.
But there's a guy I'm working with now that signed a 3-year, and I think that works great for him because he is unsure. And for those people out there that are unsure, that don't really understand the obligation, there's a 6 and 2, which is 6 years in the National Guard, 2 years on the inactive reserve list, and then there's a 3 and 5. Regardless, you'll have to do what's considered an 8-year obligation, but the reasoning, we call it 6 and 2, is the 6 years out of those 8 is when you're actually doing guard stuff, whereas in the 3 and 5, you're doing 3 years guard stuff, 5 years you're on the IR list, which is basically a list. If things were to ever kick off and they needed to get people before they initiated the draft, they would pull off that list and recall all the reserves or all the people who are previously trained in prior service first before we ever initiate a draft of some sort. So that list has not been used in quite some time as far as mandatory service. The last time I think in recorded history we've ever used it before we initiated the draft was Vietnam. If that tells you kind of peace of mind on whether or not you want to spend 5 years on a list where you could get called up. So outside of everything guard related, is the plan to come back to Connorsville, or is the idea that, with your air traffic controller career, with your special forces, aspiration, potential college goals, are you, planning on setting up shop somewhere else, or is it return to Connorsville, stay in Connorsville?
The plan right now will probably be return to Connorsville for a little bit. Definitely not long term. I'm not staying here. Sorry for you people that stay here and love it here, but I'm definitely not gonna stay here. I'm definitely gonna come home, probably say my goodbyes, and then try and set up somewhere else.
Yeah.
I kind of want to get out of the state if I can.
Yeah.
If not, at least move up to a bigger city, more of a better area, and then, like I said, kind of want to help just educate people about what all of it actually is.
I think you had us in the first half, but the comment of, I'm going to leave Connorsville, I was kind of froze up a bit. I was like, oh no, people aren't going to like this. But then you said, I plan on leaving the state. So I think that's less a slight on Connorsville and more of a kind of weighing your pros and cons on moving out of the state. So
just kind of want to see the world more.
Yeah. So obviously the big goal is for you, diversifying your options and setting yourself up for success. And so letting people know at home what kind of got you involved, what your roots are, what your background is, I think helps them kind of relate some way. The hardest part about my job is building rapport, but also building that relationship where they can relate to me and relate to my story and relate to my instances of what got me into the Guard, what got me involved in this. And so, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming here and explaining everything and giving us a little bit of feedback on your pathway for the Guard. Obviously, for anybody at home interested in the Guard, you always have my contact information showing up at the bottom of the screen, and you can feel free to swing by the Armory anytime over there at Roberts Park on Waterloo Road. But Wesley, I wish you the best of luck. I'll be there when you leave in Muncie and later this month. I'll be there when you graduate basic combat training, and I'll be there when you graduate AIT. So I'm super excited, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here for us.
Thank you.